Are you ready to perform at your highest potential? Thank you for joining this GP Strategies webinar, where we'll explore best practices and innovative insights to help you and your organization improve performance.
And welcome, everybody. I will be hosting this session with our panel of team members that we will introduce you to shortly. I just want to start with the role of L&D in tough times. I guess if you look at that heading, it says tough times. Well, I guess, since way back before COVID, I would say it's been tough times ever since, right? So realistically, do we think it's going to get better? Will there be easy times? I'm not entirely sure anymore. So we felt while there's all kinds of activity going on in the industry, not only automotive, but all industries, it's getting tougher and tougher out there. So, from back in the COVID days to leading up into now, there's a lot of innovation that's come about. GP Strategies has worked very hard on looking into how we can provide different approaches in relation to challenging times. And this discussion today is bringing to light some of those areas of innovation that we work in, as also some stories of what's happening around the world, especially in these areas, in these time zones, that have their own challenges and own inconsistencies with market conditions. So my name is Laurie Martin. I'm the Senior Director for Asia, Middle East, Africa for business development, so providing solutions and strategies for learning and development. Work predominantly in the automotive industry, but we work in many non-automotive industries as well. So we're able to tap into different industries where certain solutions may fit other industries. And I guess this is why we've got this great panel on today. I'd like to introduce you to the team, and I will start with Scott.
Let's get myself off mute. Thank you, Laurie. Scott McCormack here. I think some of you on the call I know already. Great to be on today. I head up GP Strategies operations in Thailand, Philippines, and India, and I'm one of our automotive leads. So looking forward to this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Faisal Mirjoon. I'm based in the UK and have been in training probably since about 1990, mostly automotive. Probably 70% of my work is automotive, the rest non-automotive. And yeah, really looking forward to today's conversation.
And Joachim.
Well, hello, my name is Jochen Becht. I'm based in Dubai. I'm the managing director and senior consultant of JBX and Company. So basically, I grew up predominantly in the automotive industry for, let's say, 17 years, and then obviously founded my own company where we consult companies across industries, primarily in the area of premium and luxury brands, automotive, as well as fashion, hospitality, aviation, and real estate. And we do consultancy across the entire customer life cycle in terms of end-to-end customer journeys, client experience, and brand strategies.
Thanks, team. And from a GP Strategies perspective, it's these kind of teams we put together to support a lot of our business around the world. So, okay, let's set the scene. So, we've done a little bit of research in the last week or so about, what are the headlines around the world. Some of these headlines here are based on all the way from Australia through to Asia, through to North Asia, and over to India and Middle East. And, all of these areas here are associated with some of the challenges in relation to what's happening in the real time. So, for example, in Australia, at the end of financial year, which is June, there's a big rush of buying pickup trucks because you can claim a lot of that on tax. This year was the worst year in about 10 years that sales has dropped. So that's indicating that all industry is soft and they don't have that cash to actually claim more tax back. Then we look at places like, the Chinese automakers, they're actually doing very well in a lot of regions and selling, right? However, the cost of cheaper electric cars, the battery prices are collapsing. So there are parts and levers of sales areas that are affecting different parts of the industry. Tata Motors in India, an 8% drop in sales in June. If you can imagine how many Tatas are being sold in India, 8% is a significant amount, right? And then you're hearing on all of the media that, you know, year-on-year sales are dropping for EV, right, and stabilizing. So what does that future mean? If there's a big stock of EVs and they're not being sold, what does that mean for those who sell the vehicles? What does that mean for the consumer? And then, you know, in Korea, which is a huge market for luxury, what we've identified there is 2 days ago, they're saying there was huge declines in sales of luxury vehicles, down 63% for the first half. Audi down 62%, right? Porsche, even one of those iconic brands, down. So that's not one particular brand, that's industry-wide. Now, if I was the OEM and be looking at those sales figures, what can we do to support OEM to help them understand that there may be different ways to start changing the way that they think in relation to the sales funnel and sales pipeline? So this is happening now. This panel that we've got on are experiencing and providing these solutions. So this is what we're going to talk about today. So today, in our briefing, it's understanding the current landscape, right? So, you know, we've given you a snapshot, but the team here are experiencing it on the ground in the field and can talk about those stories. Some of the training solutions that are being provided, right? And practical strategies. So the challenge is in L&D, there's the senior leaders of L&D, but there's many of the people in the management level or supervision level that want to act change, but to act change requires strategy. And so in the interactive Q&A, what we're asking is please ask questions as we're going, as we're talking. We will have questions and answers at the end, but if there's something burning, something you'd like an answer to, or some challenge you've got, please bring it up, because we want this to be as valuable to you and interactive. So we'll go into the panel discussion. I'll open up with Scott, right, in relation to, you know, what is the role of L&D in tough times?
Thanks, Laurie. Before I start, I just wanted to recognize that when I saw the list of people registered for today, there's a lot of non-automotive people. So most of our discussion today is going to be on the automotive business, but I think from a sales perspective, there's a lot of the same principles here can be applied to your sales operation, whether you're B2C or B2B, on how you handle this, you know, these kind of tough times. So as Laurie said, you know, we're seeing a lot of economic indicators that say we're in a downturn in many markets. Industry sales volumes are dropping, consumer confidence is dropping, and it gets more difficult to sell our products. So let me talk about, as an L&D manager, you know, whether you're called an academy manager, a retail training center manager, what is it that you should do? And so I want to look at two areas. One is what I believe you should be focused on, and secondly, what the attitude needs to be in times like these. So the first thing you need to do, I believe, is you've got to turn the dial. So you need to turn the dial away from traditional course certification training and turn it towards activities that generate incremental sales today. So during these tough times, the best operators that I've seen focus back on the basics of their sales funnel. And I'm sure whatever industry you're in, you have a sales funnel with people showing interest at the top of the funnel to people actually buying your product or service at the bottom of that funnel. So the best operators I've seen ask themselves two questions. Number one, how do we find new sales leads? And how do we do that without spending a fortune on additional marketing? Because in tough times, nobody's going to give anyone additional marketing budget. And number two, how do we minimize the leakage at each step in the sales funnel? For example, how do we do a great job on needs analysis so a buyer is willing to take a test drive? How do we improve our negotiating ability so we get more buyers to make a positive buying decision? So these are the areas of focus, and I'd love, you know, we're going to hear from Faisal and Jochen, and we invited them on because of their, you know, really in the field experience today on how they're working with various clients on very specific training interventions that actually ask those questions and answer those questions about improving sales funnel performance.
Scott, I like that point you made about stop the leakage. Stop the leakage is about converting more, right? And what kind of level of attention is made to that. So Faisal, I know, we're on KPIs to meet certain performance levels, and that may be linked to sales performance. So how do you feel about what Scott's just mentioned there in relation to the pipeline funnel, the leakage, and so on?
And no, thank you very much indeed. I have to say, probably over the last 2 years, 2.5 years, probably post-COVID, from a learning and development perspective, that's probably going to be one of the most common, I'd say, requirements, for the pure and simple reason, the view is the fastest and most cost-effective way to increase volume sales is to reduce the amount of people that walk away. There is so much money that's put into the top of the funnel. Identifying leakage is one thing, but actually taking action, as Scott says, the analysis is key to plug the leaks, in which case you'll get more coming out. And certainly when you talk about tough times, a lot of the brands that we all work with are not going to close down for sure. So the reality is we've got to look at how we can keep them going. And quite often at the top of the funnel, identifying where those leads are coming from, because the other thing also, it's quite a complex topic, but leads going into the top of the funnel is great, but are they the right leads? And I think this is what training can actually do: coach and analyze what's going in and where at each level are we losing data. Because if you calculate cost per prospect, cost per lead, and you calculate the conversion ratios, again, a lead to conversion rate of 15%, 85% of your database is lost sales. And that is where the potential is. A lot of our opportunities actually on the database already. The question is, why did we lose them? And that's a huge topic on its own, but from a training perspective, that absolutely can impact bottom line at minimal cost.
Okay, so currently, from both, you're talking about plugging the leaks and stopping the gaps and identifying the data on retaining those customers to walking in. So on the flip side, maybe Jochen, you may be able to talk about in relation to the selling side and how to attract and what that means in relation to the L&D role.
Well, yes, definitely. First of all, great comments and a very good question. With our agency, we have a huge expertise in digitalizing, let's say, end-to-end customer journeys. And we always recognize, not only in automotive, but also in other industries, but we recognize that other industries are slightly better than automotive. The whole digitalization of the sales funnel, and not only of the sales funnel, also on the pre-funnels, which obviously gives you a much better, let's say, proposition when it comes to selecting the right leads. So what I'm currently seeing is that when it comes to digital ecosystems, for example, real estate or hospitality, are a little bit on the forefront than the automotive, because then obviously you have a much better proposition to select the right leads already on the forefront. And then obviously you have a different ball game when it comes to the sales department, the actual sales department, in terms of lead qualification. So overall, it comes very much down to what kind of data you select and you collect at the very beginning, and how you can make them useful for your sales department, and then obviously deciding on the right leads in the right manner. That comes down to a digital ecosystem which you need to implement in your organization. And now I want to build the bridge towards L&D. What I'm currently seeing in the automotive, and compared to, I just take real estate, for example, is that the whole organization is much more trained on the end-to-end digital ecosystem, right? So when it comes to how I generate leads through the World Wide Web, throughout digital media, how that's going to be fed into the sales funnel, and afterwards qualified as an automated basis, and then obviously giving the right leads to the sales consultants on hand, backed by marketing automation and related content management. And that's what I'm seeing is very much trained not only to the customer facing stuff in the real estate, but also to the back office. So it's kind of a 360 holistic approach. And when I go to automotive, I still sometimes have the feeling that it's still a little bit isolated, that we are training a lot on the sales funnel part and probably also an equivalent in the service part. But the 360-degree view, including also the marketeers and the back office stuff from CRM, for example, that's a little bit missed out, and that brings huge potential also for L&D.
You're absolutely right there, Jochen. There's always, when we're working with L&D experts, there's always that gap in bringing in the marketing side, and they're so valuable in that learning and development experience. I know Scott and I have many of times said, can we get the assets from the marketing to put into the L&D? And it's totally foreign. So Zach, was there any questions that have come up in this?
Laurie, nothing as of yet. Yeah.
Okay, no problem.
Laurie, if I can just expand on this a bit more and just focus in maybe on the L&D leader, because I think at any time, but particularly in tough times, the leader of the L&D leader, the leader of the training academy has some quite unique pressures on him and her. Everyone on this call who's an L&D leader is constantly asked to justify the return on investment. Why are we spending all this money on training? What are we getting from it? So in these tough times, in my view, there's two attitudes that I think L&D leaders need to adopt. And the first is not to take no for an answer. So to take, we were talking about sales funnel. If you go to your sales director in your OEM, or you go to some of your large dealers and go, oh, we're going to do some work on your sales funnel, the first thing they're going to say is, well, we've done that for years. We know how to do it. What could we possibly learn? And I think it's just fine like it is. That you've got to have we know through experience that there's always something to work on. There's always something to improve, and that in good times make all of us, most of us, go a little bit soft and a little bit ill-disciplined. That's just human nature. And so we need to keep pushing and not take no for an answer. So I've watched, say, Faisal run a session with distributors on really understanding their sales funnel and the leads that already exist within their business, and truly understanding what the ratios are through that sales funnel. And at the beginning, they would have said, oh, well, we kind of know that. But at the end, they really know it. And they walk away knowing we've got all this untapped potential of customers to talk to that they already exist as a contact within our business. And they're really excited about going and doing that. So it's helping them, immediately impact sales based on that training. Second thing is,
add, Scott?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Faisal.
Add, Scott. One thing from a learning perspective that's critical on that sales funnel analysis is identifying where the team need to develop. Because, for example, and I don't want to go into detail, but if you've got 100 appointments and only 25 test drives, 75 said no. But why? What could we have done differently? Was a test drive offered? Was it a bad presentation? I mean, there's lots of criteria that meant 75 people declined or didn't go for a test drive. And there is a huge developmental opportunity that data can tell us that can positively impact the business if we read the data right.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point.
Yeah.
Probably we can make one comment here. What I'm currently seeing also, especially in the automotive, is that a lot of focus is put on the sales department per se, where we always put, let's say, the blame on the sales consultants that leads are not properly qualified, conversions are not properly understood, and so on. and less focus is put on the marketing department or the CRM department. And I think that's a huge potential as well, because the more qualified leads you generate in the first hand, the easier the job is for the sales consultant. And a lot of, as I said, a lot of effort is put on the sales department or later on the service department. But I miss out a little bit the training, the 360-degree training on digital side, but also on the physical side for the marketeers. I know a lot of expertise is brought in from agencies and so on, and I'm not saying per se that that has to be stopped. But traditionally, what I'm seeing is that we have marketers sitting in organizations. They are not fully up to speed when it comes to marketing automation and pre-qualification of leads and how you generate them probably on an automated basis in order to make the life as easy as possible for the sales department.
Yeah, great points.
Very good points. So,
yes, and just so Laurie, just if I could, there's one other important attitude that I think L&D leaders need to adopt, and that is you got to know what you're going to give up. And I see a lot of L&D leaders, training managers, they get their objectives for the year. That they know that at the end of this year we're going to have 85% of our service advisors certified, right? And they're really focused on that, and they measure that every month, and they track their progress towards it, which is all great. But you've got to know, if you're going to add now some really results focused training interventions into your calendar, into your budget, then something else has to give, right? Because the budgets are finite, and nobody's going to give you more budget in tough times. And so you've got to know what you're prepared to let go of. And you're holding on tightly and trying to do everything. I think in tough times, that's a mistake. In tough times, I would almost guarantee your senior business leaders, in general, they want to hear from you to say that you've got a plan, that you say, I know times are tough for the business. Here's what I'm going to do to support our salespeople, our dealers, to sell more cars today. And to achieve that, we're going to be pulling back on service advisor certification, whatever that is. So your senior business leaders should understand the trade-offs of needing to focus more on the here and now of sales performance today. So I'd say don't fall into the trap of trying to continue to do everything well, right? Just not possible. So figure out what you're going to give up, and then go and share that plan with your senior management and say, we're going to chase this, and here's how we're going to do it. And in order to do that, we're going to make sacrifices over here. Perfectly natural conversation to have with your senior leaders. Thanks, Laurie.
No worries. And look, before the next question, some of these points that the panel have put together, if you were sitting as an L&D manager or somebody responsible, as Scott mentioned, learn to say no. So you have to be bold. You have to think differently. You have to take a risk on certain ways in which things are done that is going to move the needle, because it's like the old adage, if you do today what you did yesterday, you'll do the same tomorrow. So it's about this conversation here. There's all kinds of innovation right now. So it's taking note of those, and how do you explore them going forward? Okay, so in tough times, as we know, only the strong survive, right? So, what does differentiate the strong competition in the industry? And there's all kinds of competition, right? From so many more segments in the markets now. And Jochen had mentioned to me in this pre-meet that he doesn't even know what makes and models and brands there are in the Middle East market right now, because there's that many of them. So these are quite interesting topics, when beforehand there were certain makes and models that you would focus on, but now the choice is out there. So I'll start with Faisal and just get your feedback in relation to all the training you do in this area.
No, thanks. I think one thing's for sure is differentiation is certainly getting harder. Going back when I started, product, being honest with you, certainly the premium sector was the key differentiator, product, substance, etc. But the reality is nobody makes a bad car today, certainly in premium, and even you look at volume, nobody makes a bad car. There are no bad brands, because you could look at brand differentiation to a degree, but you look at some of the brands you'd mentioned today, you look at other brands. There aren't any bad brands anymore. And quite often on the on the cold front, we're bullied into price being a differentiator, which is no good for any of our masters at all. So I think in terms of how brands differentiate today, and I'm sure Jochen will have a few things as well to say, but brand perception, quite often people's perception of a brand will quite often govern whether somebody goes there or not. And the question is, and Scott, we talked about this when we were in the Middle East some time ago, do we do anything? Is there any development on how to influence perception of the brand? Probably not, but certainly there is a need there. The brand social currency, what do people think if I'm going to drive this car or own a particular brand? So I think that comes into it an awful lot. But more so, I think how a brand now chooses to engage with its audience, but also its fans, will be one of the key differentiators. And I think that's a huge topic today, brand engagement, how a brand chooses to communicate, to touch its client base and its fan base. I think today will be the key key differentiator. You look at technology, you look at innovation, which I think is brilliant, but there's also a demand for the human touch and humanizing a brand, and our ability to actually interact and offer some empathy, offer some care, some trust, making it easy. There is, and later on we'll talk about the role of a salesperson, but one of my sons, who was 25, bought a car online simply because the brand he chose was the easiest car to buy, and he bought it online. And the first time he saw that car was when they delivered it. And interestingly, it wasn't a sales team that influenced him to buy that car. It was actually a marketing team that influenced him to buy that car, not sales. And I think, and later on we'll talk about that, but you can actually see the tide turning, I'd say, from a selling perspective to an influencing perspective. You think Gen Y, Gen Z are tomorrow's buying power. And, I don't think selling in its traditional format is enough to stand a brand out. So, I mean, there's a lot there to think about, but I'd say those are sort of the key points that differentiates. But also, I think social identity, social currency, by the way, is also a big one. And as I'm sure Jochen will touch on, especially in luxury, social identity, social security plays a big part of it as well.
Fantastic points. Very different.
I completely agree on that, Faisal. So what I'm seeing at the moment is that the traditional values in buying a car are not there so much anymore on the forefront. It's not so much about what kind of service package is included. So more the product related assets are not so much on the forefront anymore. It's more about what you are saying, the community. It's more about the experience, because most of the products, they are comparable. And it's more about, okay, what kind of innovational factors brings the car to me? What is the experience around? You touch base on the buying experience. The more easy it is, the more value it brings to me. I, as a marketer, always say the product itself needs to be seamlessly integrated into a lifestyle of consumer. And then obviously you are successful in what you're doing from a marketing perspective and the sales perspective. And I completely agree with you. The more effort and the more effective the marketing team is, the more easy is it for the sales department then to close the deal. And that's how it should be, because obviously marketing is not only about putting nice advertisements somewhere. It's about preparing the lead in the sense that obviously throughout psychological storytelling, the sales consultant just needs to close the deal somehow. And that brings me back then to the perception of all the products. The more experience you add on as a brand, besides the product, the more attractive is it for the end customer at the end.
Just one thing, Jochen, on that. It'd be interesting to get your view, because I've gone through, I think a few months ago, you go through the Instagram pages of some of the brands that we work with, and the effectiveness of some of the messaging from the Instagram post? What's the hook? What's the message? How is that Instagram post, for example, designed to create an action? Or is it just a nice picture saying, hey, look at this? And I don't know how you feel about, if, for example, the impact of social media and how that differentiates a brand and makes it attractive.
It's a very good point, and that's a topic I love to talk about because it's an easy catch at the end of the day to understand. For example, if you look in real estate or even hospitality, companies are much more driven by organic community management, and that's exactly what a brand identifies. In the automotive, I still find it a little bit isolated that most of the content marketing is driven by the OEM, by the headquarter, probably by the regional offices in the respective countries, but not so much from the dealership itself. In terms of really integrating the end users into the marketing communication. I mean, the customer at the end of the day is the best marketing tool, whatever you can have, right? And I would, whenever I would sell a car as a dealership, I would craft from an L&D perspective, I would craft kind of a social media course for customers, for end customers, for free towards the customer, because I mean they're so excited. We just need to find a way how to use this content in order to make it to bring it back to the brand, in order to make it useful for a marketing perspective. But when it comes to this kind of Instagram posts and so on, it's much more engaging when it comes to real estate and even the fashion industry than it is at the end with the automotive at the moment. Yeah. So, but again, that's a different approach. What I'm currently seeing that in the OEM section, it's much more top-down driven. And for example, in the fashion world or even in the hospitality, it's bottom-up driven, where you give much more force towards the end customer in order to generate content, which is then fed back to the company and utilized for proper marketing campaigns. So what I'm saying here, it's not per se this standalone post over here, but it's much more this kind of storytelling, this storyline, this storybook over time, based on certain content criteria, which then adds up to a holistic story. That might be a cultural story in the Middle East. That might be kind of an excitement story. Bring your car to the desert, going for camping or whatever it is. Yeah. So it's just shows the capabilities. And for customers, I'm saying, okay, if this customer can do it, I can do it as well. So it's not this artificially created content where I, as an end consumer, probably don't believe anymore, but I just buy the story from the end customer because that's much more reliable in my sense.
Yeah, and just to follow on, and just to my final point on this one, and it really links to what you've said. The most successful brands are always on, and there was some research done here in the UK. The internet goes mad between 10 p.m. and like 1 a.m. in the morning. The internet goes mad, and that's when engagement is at its highest. Kids are in bed, your boss is not sending you emails, your phone is off, and you have the maximum dwell time from like 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. And I am struggling to try and convince businesses that actually you're closed from 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, you're closed. We can't communicate with you. Clients can't engage with you. But that is when our consumer base are at their most active and you're closed. And to try and look at what businesses can do to pick up interest, to do something. And I go back to engagement, to engage with a client so that actually at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, when they wake up, they can think, wow, this is what I'm going to do. And the website just isn't enough now. So what can we do to engage when we're closed so that actually the next day they can carry that on and say, right, first thing I'm going to do is go to a dealer on my way to work. And again, eBay, Amazon, Google, they're all on 24 hours a day, which is why they're successful. So it's just taking that and putting it into a retail context.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, definitely. probably might not help so much now if we have this kind of downtrend already and marketing budgets are anyway a little bit low. But from a long-term strategy, that's exactly the way how a company should invest. I mean, there are a lot of technical ecosystems around where you can solve these problems. I mean, there's AI now popping up. VR technologies are on the market for a very long time. Immersive experience is on the forefront. But what I'm saying is, and that's the easiest part, is utilize your CRM system to the full extent and probably also plug in a data management platform. I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with that, but that's exactly the platform where you can gather data from across the internet from everyone who is, let's say, typing a Google search. So there are tracking possibilities on an automated basis where you can, first of all, fetch those people who are interested in your product, and then bring them back to your website. And then, of course, a typical traditional website doesn't make it anymore. Yeah, so you would need to play around with your virtual car configurators, with e-commerce options, and so on and so forth, to really make the experience, the user experience, as easy as possible. And we see that, again, real estate is a typical example, fashion as well. Fashion, for example, where we have this virtual try-ons. You know, you can upload your picture to your website, and then you can choose your products, and you can have this virtual try-ons and so on. Most of the car configurators are, I would say, spot on as well in the meantime. But you can't really replicate a virtual test drive at the moment. I mean, for sure you could if you invest properly. If you invest in this immersive experience together with your ecosystem and make your data available, then for sure there is much more coming out. And that's now building the bridge again to L&D. So probably you don't have the money to invest in this huge ecosystem and bring all the systems in-house now. But what I'm currently seeing is that you have already a huge data set on hand, right? You gather so much data from your CRM system, from your DMS system, and so on. But learning and development also needs to put the focus on how to make use of these data in the right way, in the right time. And that's a little bit the lack at the moment, what I'm seeing.
Thanks for that. This is quite interesting information, because the first point that Faisal made was, what's the differences in strong competition? And he made the point that, it's been predominantly price differentiation, right? But the points that Jochen and Faisal has brought up in this discussion are all about very different ways to look at it. Social currency, identity, right? Organic community management. So, many times we will go to a dealership and you'll see that there's a winter campaign on, and it's summer on the other side of the world, and you've got snow when it's the middle of summer. And so you're absolutely right. Having it relevant to that local community, something that engages. But at the same time, what we also see, and we see it here in Thailand, is the onset of social influencers and their ability to sell more by using those social media platforms. So definitely there are differences in competition, but it also comes down from the capabilities of the individual as well. Because if you do rely on central headquarters or even regional decision making, it may not be as impactful.
Laurie, we also have a question from chat.
Okay, sure.
There's a question that should a different dipstick or L&D measurement need a makeover in tough times as a differentiator?
Yeah, I think, Laurie, I can take that. Yeah, I think that's it's a really good question, and it gets back to the point of you've got to, when you kind of realize that we're heading into a downturn, or we're in a downturn, and it's severe enough that we've got to actually change what we're focused on, then that automatically leads into changing the KPIs you're going to focus on. Most OEMs are obsessed with trying to measure everything, right? And in some areas they do a great job of measuring things, and sometimes they're measuring things that don't actually matter that much. So if you are going to skew all of your training efforts towards activities that generate business today, then that is going to naturally change the KPIs you're going to hold yourself accountable for. As in some of your maybe your longer term objectives like certification rates, they go further down the page, not as important. And you're really going to look at now, for every training engagement that you have, what does it do to sales funnel numbers? What does it do to closing rates, to selling your product and service? And those, it's going to be much more focused on those business KPIs. And the age-old challenge for L&D, linking our activity to business results. You're going to have to think much more carefully about that. And I know with Faisal and with Jochen, a lot of the engagements now are that's the outcome is, okay, we identified in these dealers that they had these leads that it was either people didn't buy before, or they're people coming off a lease who could be eligible for to change their vehicle. It's much more business aligned than your typical training activity, your number of people trained, etc., or your competency rates, that kind of thing. It gets much more focused on business.
Yeah.
Hopefully that answered the question. So I'm going to round some of this off here. So what does the future of L&D sales look like? So we've just heard about, what's the role and what's the strong competition. We heard some key points about, let's say sales funnel and stopping the leakage, digital ecosystems, right? So there's a number of areas that look on the retention side, and there's also areas that look on the attraction side, right? But then when we go, what differentiates? We still keep hearing, it's all about price. The EVs have lowered their price, and it's challenging the market. But what we also see, and what the let's say the sales level consultants we work with, as Scott's mentioned, is that they're doing things that are more focused on their generation, that are much more innovative and diverse than what, say, a traditional sales consultant would do. So how do we as L&D shape the future of the workforce into the way that they think, and not into the way that we're currently thinking at the moment? So what we did is we asked ChatGPT this question, right? The sales consultant today to the sales consultant tomorrow. And these were the points that came straight out of ChatGPT. So today and what both Jochen, Scott, and Faisal have mentioned, today, currently dealing with customers face to face, engaging in direct conversations and physical demonstrations of the products. Faisal just mentioned his son just bought a vehicle online. No product demonstration, relied on interpersonal skills, product knowledge, and personal rapport with sales, right? So it's very much a person-to-person interaction, right? Not a lot with digital, right? They may be using WhatsApp or Line or whatever it may be to communicate. But tomorrow, which really is happening today, but at a very ground level, is there is engagement with customers. The customers still want to go in physically, right? But they also have that line of virtual. And as Faisal mentioned, the busy time is the times when the dealers are closed, right? But there will be a reliance on heavy digital tools, platforms, customer interaction, and AI driven. And as Jochen mentioned, there's different systems that are coming out in different industries that the automotive industry could tap into. But then how do you look at training them all in these new technologies? Because that's the biggest challenge, to adopt technology. If I'm 60 years old and I have to adopt a new technology, how do we change the mindset to adopt that technology? Using data-driven insights. So we talked about data before. And so these areas here are the areas that we're going to talk about in the next couple of slides. So if we go into this, right, how does business evolve to meet the changing requirements of a sales consultant? So I'll open this one up to Faisal, because Faisal, you live and breathe this every day.
Well, I think there are a few things here again that we've touched on. Marketing certainly have a more dramatic effect nowadays, number one. Number two, people are going online a lot more now. So you really have to ask yourself, where does sales fit in, or rather selling fit in to this overall journey? So I think that is a question I think a lot of brands are suffering with, I'd say, at the moment. If you look at if you go down to, I mean, we still have a retail sales team in many of our clients' establishments, and if you look at the quality of what, or the characteristics rather, of what that person now has to be. I mean, the list is very different to what it was, I think 5 years ago. You look Generation Y, Generation Z are the big players in our market now. And one question I know that's often being asked as part of when we're developing content is, what does tomorrow's profile look like, and how has business changed in order to mold what that person looks like? And I think leadership is a big part of this. How strong are our leaders to nurture tomorrow's sales team? So, for example, just to give you a few views, recruitment, we're looking for someone now, for example, who's really good on media, someone who can edit very, very quickly, someone who can communicate very well on camera, someone who's probably of a Gen Y, Gen Z type mentality, someone who understands customer service. And would you believe, actually, probably the ability to sell is probably quite far down the list, because you can certainly coach and develop someone to sell, but what you can't do is nurture that inside passion of wanting to humanize, wanting to speak to customers. If we talk about cars or whatever product you're talking about, a real passion and authenticity towards the products that you're selling, to be able to empathize, to make life really, really easy. So I think, the business and also the abilities of a salesperson, and what we're looking for tomorrow, what we're recruiting for tomorrow, I think is so different today. And I actually think brands are probably not emotionally there yet to that change, because disruption. And to give you a really good example, in Singapore's one of the stories, certainly from a little while ago, saying, right, do you know what? We've got a hole in the sales team. One person's left. We're going to replace them. We won't replace them with a salesperson. Actually, we'll look at a young up-and-coming influencer. Now, that influencer is very tech savvy, can make content, very good on camera, and can influence. And the mandate was very simple. You just carry on what you're doing. Just do it from my showroom from now on, and use our products. And do you know what? If you can bring them in, do you know what? Our lead intake goes up, and the salespeople can do their job. And my goodness me, did that shake the tree with everybody else in that business? And that totally changes and turns around the actual skills and competencies you actually need on the floor today. And there's a lot there.
Yeah, I think, and Faisal's touched on this point. We talk about the changing requirements of a sales consultant. If we go a step beyond that, we might be, I believe there's a good possibility we're moving past the point where we need a single sales consultant. Because if you think of everything we ask a sales consultant to do today, right? Be great with people, have this encyclopedic product knowledge in their head, be great negotiators. Those people are very few and far between that are good at all of that. So what we're seeing, certainly in some industries and a little bit in automotive, is this really splintering of the responsibilities. And you've seen it at a lot of places already where they have high enough volumes, the delivery process is taken away completely, and there's a delivery coordinator, because that's someone who has to be good at process details, et cetera, right? And you can hire someone to do that. As Faisal said, if you look at the people who are good at engaging online, generating interest, versus the people who can really form that connection with the customer, understand what it is they're asking for. Then the product genius type person who knows the product, front and back, up and down, and can really explain every possible detail that's of interest to that customer. And then the person that can get it from there to actually to getting a positive buying decision. That's potentially a whole lot of different people. And so as we think about, I think in L&D, part of our role is to be in that conversation with the rest of our OEM, everyone in our OEM, and our dealer partners, to say, how is sales evolving? And should we just have these sales consultants that do the whole process, or should we be very thoughtfully trying to break the process up in a way that means we get people who are naturally very well matched to the skills required for part of that role, and then we can A, find those people, B, train them and retain them?
Scott, I guess that also mitigates the risk associated with retention of sales consultants as well, so that you're spreading the skill set across a number. And we all know in the industry, all the L&D goes into the sales process and the selling, but then they leave and go to somewhere else, and you have to start that cycle again. So I guess, would that actually mitigate some of that risk by putting speciality in it?
Yeah, it certainly does. When you spread the tasks across a number of people, and you've got to do it in a smart way. One of the things customers do like, we all know, is that they like to have a common contact as they go through this process. So you got to manage that. People actually, in general, hate being handed over unless it's done in a very kind of nuanced and skillful way. So you got to think through that part of it. But certainly, that's, yeah, it's the difference between losing a chef in your restaurant versus losing someone who preps salads.
Very, very good point.
Can I just say though, and this is going to be a bit of a grenade, I would say. Is there an appetite tomorrow to go to the sales outlet when, I mean, you look at what Jochen was saying before. Is there an appetite now with Generation Y, Generation Z to go and get a face-to-face sales experience? My son said to me, just to elaborate, he said, I don't have time to go to a dealer, to park, to battle through traffic. Why should I? And that just doesn't work for me. And I'm a petrol head. I love cars, and that's part of the experience. So I'll never stop going to dealers, but I am a tiny minority. And that's something I think we have to factor in.
And I think, Jochen, you must be, yeah, when you look at what you design and that whole sort of offline online experience as someone goes through the whole purchase journey, that must be something you see.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a very good point, because necessarily, I would say the younger generation, they are not so much going anymore to the to the physical store. I'm not sure if it's only related to the time, but the better your experience is online, the more likely is that the younger generation is obviously buying your car, because again, it's about how you can explore the car on the digital world. You know, it's in many other industries, and we know that it's not only car related. We are going to Amazon, we're going to whatever store, and we don't go to a physical store anymore to buy it. So it's natural to buy a computer online and these kind of things, whereas 20 years ago you had to physically touch it, feel the haptic, and so on and so forth. So it's now exactly the same development with the car. Per se, most of the cars, as we said at the very beginning, are not so differentiating anymore as it was, let's say, 10 years ago. So, you know, innovation in the car, in-car entertainment, and so on, they're spot on. You know, I mean, there's nothing where you have a disadvantage anymore to go for a brand which you probably don't know so much. But what I'm saying is also, and that's the bridge then to the evolving, let's say, sales consultant role, or the role of the sales department per se. When we say that we need to probably give more responsibility or different responsibilities to a salesperson, I'm seeing it much more from the omni-channel perspective, digital and physical. So we have so many different channels, so many different tools, whether it's a website or an application or the face-to-face interview and so on and so forth. And we said already that responsibilities needs to be shifted also towards social media capabilities, community management, and so on. If we think in this kind of traditional customer journey, you know, from the information phase towards the repurchase phase, most of the automotive players, they still think, okay, in the middle somewhere, there's their sales phase, and that's where the show happens, and so on and so forth. sales relevant phase, because we would need to train the sales consultant to close the deal, to go into the call to action in the information phase, in the pre-purchase phase, in the sales phase, and so on and so forth. So the skill set, it's much more different than it was in the past. Of course, it's nice that we have the capabilities of social media content creation for a sales consultant, because that's also kind of a forefront at the moment. But when it comes to closing the deal and looking into the conversions, we need to think from two sides. First of all, how can I close the sales deal within the respective phase? That's one thing. And the other one is obviously how I can convert the customer best from one phase to another phase. That's the skill set what we need to take in consideration. And Scott, as you said already, probably if you refer to the restaurant, you have a chef, someone prepares the salad. I think all these people are equal in the future. You know, I mean, you have a chef for the salad, you have a chef for the pre-course, you have a chef for the main course, you have a chef for the dessert, and so on and so forth. Because in every single phase, obviously, you can convince the customer and you can tell a story about your product and your brand at the end of the day, and you have the potential to close the deal.
Great, really great conversation here. There's also that part that you bring it back to the different generations and the different demographics there. They in the learning environment, the traditional way is web-based training or instructor-led training or virtual training. But when they look at the reels or the TikToks and so on, they're looking at something, they're learning something in 30 seconds or 1 minute, right? So their attention to learn in the flow of work may well change. Instead of having to sit down for that 30-minute or 1 hour product update, it may be at their fingertips on their phones, so that they can continue honing their skills, but at the same time matching the way in which they learn in the modern way. So just letting everybody know, this is being a great conversation. So we will go over a bit, so you're most welcome to stay on. If you do have to hard stop, this will be recorded. We've only got a couple of questions left, but once again, they're leading into this overarching, covering all the aspects. So I'll go into the next question, which we feel is a big one, and all of the team have put this together. And this is to do with, you know, we saw in the tomorrow data-driven, and everything is data-driven now. What does that mean? You know, how do we use the data? So how can data-driven decision-making from other industries be applied in automotive sales? So I'll lead in with Jochen, because there's very much he's talked about digital ecosystems, and we'll get a response from all of the team.
Perfect. Yeah, a very good question. And I think one of the most important at the moment. Brings me back to what I said at the very beginning. I think the challenge here is two-sided. One, what I see not only in the automotive industry but also in other industries is that we have very heterogeneous ecosystems. If I simplify that more into the automotive, you have a DMS system and you have a CRM system. Both systems are overlapping in many processes, and most of the people, especially salespeople, they don't really know which system to utilize in which sense. And I think it comes down to the process and the system integration, which really needs to be spot on here in terms of making the best utilization out of these systems. But let me start basically from the very beginning, and that's also the connection to L&D. What I'm seeing is in real estate, and especially in hospitality, is there's much more focus put on data management, right? What kind of conversations I need to utilize with end clients, digitally or physically, and what kind of information or data per se in the very beginning I can get out of this conversation and store probably in a data management platform. And then obviously on the second stage, make them, useful for another client conversation at the right time with the consumer. So what I'm saying here is that per se, there's a lot of information gathered from the customer and sometimes unconsciously. So there's not really a strategy behind. And that's why it's the patterns are not really there in the systems, how you can make a proper use of the systems. Now, again, everything comes down to a proper data management platform and a proper segmentation of data. And then going further, you easily can utilize this data for, let's say, a sales prediction or a churn prevention segmentation, which you then can give a ready-made pattern already towards the salespeople, and they know exactly if the customer comes in or you meet them on an online portal, what is the customer about, how you need to talk to them, and what does it take in order to sell your product towards the customer. Now, it's not per se only the digital ecosystem. There's also another skill which is very important, which is again storytelling. Storytelling from a marketing perspective, but also from a sales perspective. I generally have a huge background in marketing psychology, and that's why it's a little bit my baby as well. And I see there's really less focus put on how you really talk to a client in terms of a psychological approach, in terms of really unconsciously influence a customer on the buying decision. And that's a technique which is not so much prominent in the automotive as I can see it at the moment, but it's much more on the forefront, for example, in hospitality, in high-end hospitality, but as well as in luxury fashion. How you involve, how you create narratives around the customer. So first of all, you need to understand what is storytelling about and what it's not about. So it's not about your product description and how fancy your brand is and so on. It's more about creating a narrative which resonates with your end consumer, which implicates already that you need to have a huge knowledge and a data set about your customer in order to get the right information at the right time. And that's the biggest challenge at the moment, where you say, okay, you have a huge data set. Most of the companies, they gather data, millions of data, but they don't make it useful, available for sales or for service clientele in order to really, create this kind of narrative and this kind of story. And that's the challenge, but also the opportunity for L&D now to not only focus on the isolated sales or service approach, but also see the holistic picture and understand the organizational picture from a data-driven decision making. So what kind of data do I need to gather? How do I need to store them? What kind of ecosystems do I need to have in order to make them available right in the time when the customer walks in, or the customer is even unknown? And then obviously to feed back the right information back into the system to make them useful for even other clients, for data segmentation, for lead qualification, where you can create this kind of lookalikes, which are useful for your future customer, which at that stage you might even don't know.
Great information there. What I'd like to do is get two different perspectives from both Faisal and Scott. So Faisal, I'll go with you. Like you've just heard from Jochen in relation to what different industries are doing and how far advanced they are in this, and how does that compare to what you're seeing in all of the interactions you have with the different brands and so on, and how what Jochen has just said compares?
I think if I give you an honest opinion, I think there is a bit of a silo between marketing and sales, firstly. It is my gut feeling, because I think marketing can often be driven with data, which is absolutely the right way to look at it. But the theory of that doesn't necessarily impact sales. And the sales teams generally will go by gut feel. The only data the sales teams have that they can work with, and I'm sorry to go back to it again, is the sales funnel analytics. But the problem with those is, and I say this in the nicest way because we know this, the rubbish that goes in gives you rubbish back out again. And in that respect, I'd say probably 75 to 80% of the businesses that I work with are not 100% comfortable with the data they've got.
Right.
Rather the quality of the data they've got, which is why there's a perception in people's minds, you know what, forget data because it's not accurate. And if the data is not accurate, then do you know what, let's just carry on the way we've been going for the last 50 years. And so I think when it comes to data, there's a mindset, there's a data mindset that we need now. And again, this may form part of recruitment to look to sort of bring people in who understand the data that's available and believe we can do something with the data to impact volume sales. because I have to say, trying to coach and train people who are not interested in data about the importance of data is, really is one of the biggest challenges we'll ever had. And I, to make a bold statement, and I know that's not what this is about, but you really have to question, for many of the people that have been employed, are they still in the right jobs today?
So it was a loaded question, Faisal. So we've heard the art of the possible through Jochen, what's happening in other industries, and then we've just compared it with automotive. And there is a huge gap. We know that. We're from automotive. There is a huge gap, right? From the systems within the dealer, within the OEM, what it is they provide. But from our side, from Scott's side, we look at the data through learning, and we link the data through learning that may require learning in getting that in this industry up to the level that Jochen is talking about. So Scott, can you talk about the data-driven approach from a learning and development side?
Yeah, sure. And I'll bring this back to very practical things that we're already doing today, and to generate more sales today in tough times. So every organization is already sitting on data that has potential sales in it. So if they really take the time to analyze the people who came in and didn't buy, the people who bought 3 or 4 years ago, and there's now been a new model, or the people who financed their purchase and the financing has ended. They're all sources of automotive sales, and you'll find if you're in a market where you've got a group of, you got 50, 100, 200 retailers, you'll find a massive discrepancy between how well those dealers or retailers handle that data today, from really, really world class through to just not really managing at all. And that's an area that you can make a big difference today. So without really taking a step towards the brave new world that Jochen described of being really world class at this, you can just dive into that data today and find ways to move the needle on sales volume today. And then the next step beyond that would be then for L&D to engage with the business and look at how do we then redesign those processes, with the end goal in mind, that we don't have to wait for tough times to be able to identify that buyer who, say, bought 3 years ago and is ready to buy again. So I just wanted to for anyone who's kind of head is swimming with, I get this, but how do I possibly get there? I just wanted to make it a very practical step that we're already working with a number of OEMs to make a very practical difference today.
And to also add to that, Scott, there are so many data points, right? And you may have the business objective is to increase sales, but you allow that through CRM, you allow that through the sales funnel. So you've got some real data there, but also you link learning performance indicators to it. So if you link both the learning and the OEM data that's collected for the same goal, the business results, then that's when you start seeing if you're changing the mindset of the sales consultants or the organizations to be able to meet their objectives. So it's not just attendance of class, it's not just pass fail, it's how they performed within their sales objective that links back to the learning. So really, really big topic, and it's a topic that I think we all are talking about daily.
Let me also make one last comment to that
Yes.
thing. I think a quick fix also could be to design some training courses and curriculums where you involve really the entire organization or the key stakeholders from each department. Because what I'm also facing very often is, not always, but often, is that when these kind of trainings are being designed, you have a marketing training, you have a sales training, you have an after sales training, then it's primarily for the focus groups, marketing, sales, and after sales. When we talk about ecosystems, there's probably is not so much training around. When it comes to data management, there's really less training about. So what I'm saying is here, what really helps is to bring all the stakeholders and all the different departments in one workshop, in one training curriculum, and having this kind of holistic customer journey approach where you say, okay, I mean, as a marketer, you have to do these kind of things, which has a proper impact to the service department at the very end of the chain. Yeah. And in between, obviously, the sales department is sitting. So if you have this kind of healthy exchange back and forth what kind of activities the marketing has to do in order to have a major impact on the sales department and the service department. And then you also, in the same session, you get a proper feedback already from the service department and from the sales department, how the marketing department probably should adjust, and what kind of additional techniques needs to be implemented in order to make the sales activities and the service activities as convenient and efficient as possible. And vice versa, obviously, that the marketing department also learns then from these kind of departments, but also then the sales department and the service department, based on this conversation, knows already what kind of techniques and possibilities are out there in the market to have this kind of holistic approach and constant elevation of the customer journey approach, and make it even more efficient. So in terms of isolating too many curriculums, I would rather also create curriculums where all the participants are in a holistic organizational approach.
So that goes a long way to addressing Faisal's comment about working in silos. It brings it all together in a collaborative approach.
Yeah.
Really
Can
good.
I just say also there, sorry, that Scott, you remember we did that actually, Jochen. We had sales, marketing, and CRM in the same room, going through various topics, and it brings the teamwork together. There's no finger pointing saying we can't do that because of marketing. Marketing can see what sales go through. CRM can see the impact of what they're doing. And it really does make a difference to have everybody in the same room, to bring the teamwork together, but also to look at the impact of what they do and they don't do have on another department. So I think you're right, Jochen, to have something together, a curriculum together, does make a huge difference. So sorry, Laurie.
No, that's fine. And it comes back to Scott's point at the very early on is, learn to say no and think differently about how you can approach this, because this is very different. You've got to get buy-in from all of the stakeholders, not just one performance measure. So then we come to this big question, right? So we've talked about a lot of diverse ways in which you can address tough times, but there are so many things that we see are missing in relation to how you approach L&D, because there are so many different challenges. There's a challenge by every organization that will differ, right? And the way in which they want to approach it may be differently. So to the team here, and I'll start with Scott, because we're listening to challenges every day. What do you think is missing in the L&D team's portfolios currently? And then we'll get a response from everybody. And as I mentioned, this is the last question, but we will take questions and answers at the end.
Yeah, thanks, Laurie. And I will keep it brief because I know people have held on past the hour for us. I think that as L&D, we're only part of the way along the journey to give people the knowledge they need at the time they need it. So, we talk about learning in the flow of work. Rather than filling people's heads with information, giving them access through easy search, very digestible pieces of learning on the thing that they need right now for the customer that's in front of them right now. I think the natural extension of that, and it ties into this thing of having everyone together, is I think the boundary between marketing assets and learning assets is collapsing. I think customers, especially when it comes to understanding what it is they're buying, I think what customers want to see is the same thing that salespeople want to see. And so I think just removing or just diminishing that boundary to where it's almost nothing, so we think about what a customer wants to know is really the same thing that a salesperson wants to tell them. So let's just remove that barrier altogether and make sure those assets have that dual purpose.
Great points. Faisal, I'll go in with you.
Just very quickly, again, conscious of time, but if I were thinking what I would populate tomorrow's portfolio with, I'd look at things like, and probably an interesting question for the audience, when would we have last run a program or workshop on how to run and measure a successful campaign? Number one. I would focus on marketing, but I'll leave that with Jochen in a second. How to engage as a brand. I'd run CRM, put a huge focus on CRM, lead planning, understanding the mindset of tomorrow's customer. But one thing I would do, which would be quite interesting, is I would run something on how to create media, how to edit media, and put it online. Jochen talked about TikTok. A lot of people are doing it themselves, but that's where the leverage is tomorrow. And what you do find, my last point, is probably the skill to sell is slowly edging downwards as these other impacts start to make their way forward.
Good points. Very good points. Jochen.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, my understanding is really to have a holistic understanding, 360 understanding of the customer journey. I mean, for me, it's currently still too much silo driven, and by everyone connecting the dots from the very beginning and have a clear understanding what kind of touch points you have in each phase of the customer journey makes the life much more easy to understand the holistic business. Also, how you generate revenue on the long-term basis with the small bits and pieces within the respective phases of the customer journey. Now, in terms of the portfolio of a future a salesperson or a person per se in an organization, I see it in a hybrid way. First of all, yes, we have the digital natives out there who are really digital driven, and it comes natural from their end in terms of creating content, in terms of being around on social media platforms, and so on and so forth. Where I'm currently seeing, yes, a lot of existing personnel needs to bring their game to a certain level when it comes to be a digital driven behavior. But what I would also do is to invite much more experts into kind of workshops and let's say training sessions, whether from an agency or young content creators and so on, with best practice to really showcase what is possible and what kind of easiness is behind this kind of possibility. Because I think the hesitation is still there, that most of the people think, okay, I have to invest in huge ecosystems, very expensive, and here platform and their skills and so on. Most of the systems are available out there for not a huge investment. And for me, it's always surprising that most of the people also by in all respect those ones who reach a certain age in their private life are capable to utilize the fanciest and latest technology, but when it comes to business, there's still this kind of hesitation, and I think we just need to lower this kind of burden to also to see and to showcase what's possible, and to give more responsibilities towards the customer. And it's more or less learning by doing. It's at the end of the day, the more you try and the more effective it is, the more confident you get, and then you can also elevate and develop your own digital natives within the organization, despite of the age.
Thank you very much. I think, and I think there's a whole lot more missing depending on the customer's needs and challenge. And certainly, bringing on this team here, very broad-ranging experience, dealing with challenges from the ground level to the strategic level, and finding solutions to them. So I'd just like to go the last question, and I'll get just Scott to answer this one. Scott, do you think anything good comes from a downturn?
Yeah, I was just thinking that if people on the session today are reasonably, well, not even that far into their careers, what we're experiencing today is a normal cyclical economic downturn, and we haven't had one of those. So we had the GFC, which had very specific causes to it. After that, we pretty much went on just an upward path in most economies through until COVID, and then the economic slowdown for COVID was for a very obvious reason as well. We're having a normal cyclical economic downturn now, and in normal times these happen every 5 to 7 years. So this is normal, and 5 to 7 years from now it will be normal again. And what economists tell you is the great thing about recessions is that they remove the inefficient firms from the economy. And it might sound brutal, but what it does is it weeds out the weak. And as far as your retailers go, with fewer easy sales walking into through the door, the weak salespeople will leave. right? And then if your retailers manage that well, that means that you will end up with a stronger team, and you'll be really in a good position to take advantage of the good times when they come around next.
Great call. So that's the panel discussion over. I know we've gone over time, and we haven't heard many questions, but we can open it up for a minute here, and you can certainly reach out to us through our contacts. You'll get copies of the recording, and if you do have questions or challenges, we're here to answer, and including for the panel, you might want to reach out to the panel. So, Zach? Do we have any questions?
Yes, we have one more. It's should we change the mindset of sales teams from experiential selling from the 2000s era to influential selling techniques, or blending them together for better results in future?
Who'd like to answer that?
I can offer.
All of you.
Oh yeah, sorry, Jochen, you go first.
I can start with that quickly. Yes, definitely. I completely agree. Brings me back to the storytelling part and the psychological approach, because that is how you learn to influence conversations throughout a story and the narrative, which resonates with the client. So it's still about experiential, but how you talk, how you strategically talk to a client. And when I'm saying talking, it's not only about the physical talk, it's also how you craft a story via your advertisement, via your marketing material, how you play around on your social media channels over time, but especially also for the sales department, how you craft psychological, the narrative, the consumer resonates. And that comes along with a lot of, let's say, curriculums and training courses based on consumer behavior to really understand the mind of generally a human being, how decisions are made, what kind of triggers you have on hand in order to influence the emotions of the client, in order to really unconsciously lead to a call to action, which then resonates again with your business in order to sell the product.
And thanks. I mean, from my perspective, just a little bit following on from what Jochen's just said, and if I were to make a bold statement as we sort of come to an end, I think the days of feature function benefit are pretty much done now, because we can get all of that information online, to be honest. And I think the ability to influence from a salesperson's perspective, not sell, but actually influence and make someone feel, as Jochen said, appealing to some of the emotion, to make someone feel that this brand, as well as the product, feels right for me. That I don't think that's as much selling as it is influencing. So the answer to that question is I think yes, we should be looking at more emotive influencing techniques rather than just feature function benefit. Let me give you 5 reasons why I think you should buy this, because I think a lot of the times they will have read that online. If they've got a 7 or 8 year old, I'm sure that 7 or 8 year old will have done that research already online. So out of a choice of possibly 4 or 5 brands, it's which one feels right, and a lot of that's down to influencing.
Yep. And we have another question. Is it important for L&D teams to touch base with customers directly to understand the minute difference in their understanding with the feeds they get in?
Yeah, I think it's the way it's written is like I guess a statement, and fully concur with that. I think, yeah, the L&D team has to be well grounded in the reality of the market and the people that are learning what they're trying to achieve. And as I said, that gap between the market and learning needs to collapse to the point where it's almost invisible.
I think it's very important to have this kind of customer conversation. What we are doing a lot with our project is this kind of customer roundtable or even design thinking. So whenever we come up with a challenge, we firsthand we do our research, whether it's an offline desk research, but then on the second stage, necessarily it will be kind of a customer roundtable, face-to-face interviews. What is really the customer expectation? And then obviously it depends if it's a process change or or if it's a system implementation, or if it's related to the entire organization, there is a certain development in-house done. And then obviously as an iterative process, the customer is getting involved into kind of the development process. And that helps a lot. That has a tremendous impact on being successful in developing whatever it is at the end of the day. The critical part is obviously that you select the right customers at the very beginning. You have the right segment. Those customers, obviously, who can contribute in a good way, which you easily can find out, for example, throughout your NPS or throughout the customer satisfaction survey in your system. Those are who are the brand promoters or even the detractors, because obviously they have a certain diverse field and view on the brand. And then you can gather lots and useful information, which helps you a lot in terms of building up the long-term revenue streams.
Can I just also say an interesting thing from a learning and development leader's perspective? They need to go and put themselves in the shoes of the participants they're representing, because there is a huge disconnect sometimes between learning and development and the actual client, i.e. the participants we're training to really understand what they're going through today. And I think that will certainly help putting more effective curriculums together. But I know time's not always there.
That's a key point, Faisal. The areas that we work on as GP is learner centricity. So it needs to engage whatever the learning based on customer feedback or whatever it may be. It needs to appeal and attract to that particular learner, and the demographic as learners starts from every age and every background and every culture. So very key point. It's not just about the customer; it's also about the learner as well. Zach, any more questions?
Nothing else.
Okay, well, look, we've had 30 minutes, precious minutes of your extra time for those who have remained. We thank you very, very much for attending. I'd like to thank the panel personally for all of the efforts and work leading up to this and on the day. It has been extremely insightful and a plethora of information that's recorded to give to those who attended and those who haven't. And certainly we are here to be on call if you have any questions. Anything else from the panel?
No, thank you. It's been really good. So really enjoyed it. Thank you very much indeed. Loved being here.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. It was a great discussion.
And
Yeah,
Zach,
thanks, Faisal. Thanks, Jochen. It's been really eye-opening discussion.
yeah, wonderful. Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
Very much indeed.
Bye-bye.
This webinar was brought to you by GP Strategies. Together, we help organizations transform through their people. You can access more webinars or download additional resources by visiting the GP Strategies Resource Library. The link is on your screen and in the description.